There is no means of verifying which decision is the right one because there is no comparison. Everything is lived for the first time, without preparation, as if an actor were to step on stage without ever having rehearsed. I wrote these words one night when I no longer believed in anything, not in glory, not in love, not even in logic. The lamp above my desk flickered like a tired eyelid, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and doubt. I remember thinking, so this is life, a first take, shot without a script, without rehearsal, with no chance to edit the mistakes. Everything matters, yet nothing makes sense. That's the great tragic comedy. We are actors mistaking our improvisation for art. My name is Milan Kundera, and I spent my life trying to understand that mixture of absurdity and beauty, the strange music of being alive. I was born in a country that took everything seriously, politics, morality, even the rain. In Czechoslovakia, even love songs had to serve the state. We were taught to be useful, disciplined, heavy with purpose, to carry the world like a briefcase full of history, but no one ever taught us how to dance. One day I simply wanted to put that briefcase down. I asked myself, what is a life worth if it carries no weight, no memory, no justification? And instantly I was afraid, because a light life, a life without burden, is like a dream you wake from without proof it ever existed. That's the paradox I tried to capture in the unbearable lightness of being. We think we want freedom, but what we really crave is gravity, something or someone to hold us down. Absolute lightness is not peace. It's falling without vertigo. For years I believed meaning lived inside seriousness. So I wrote, I debated, I denounced. I was a very serious man, until I realized that seriousness too can be a form of vanity. It makes us feel important, as if the universe were waiting for our opinion. I used to think writing could save humanity. Later I understood, it barely saves the writer. Look around. Everyone is still fighting to exist, to prove something. We confuse heaviness with importance, noise with meaning, productivity with virtue. We scroll as if eternity were hidden between two posts. We speak of mental load, the way priests once spoke of sin. We've replaced God with self-optimization, confession with notifications, and yet the fatigue is the same, that ancient exhaustion of having to deserve the right to be alive. So tonight, let's set that weight down. We'll look at why life feels so heavy and what happens when meaning itself becomes oppressive. I'll tell you how Nietzsche imagined the eternal return, a world where every act repeats forever, and why that thought can both crush you and free you. We'll talk about freedom, memory, love, and the quiet rebellion of those who choose tenderness over cynicism. Don't worry, it won't be theoretical. It will be about you, your doubts, your ambitions, the way you lie awake replaying old choices like unfinished music. Because philosophy, if it doesn't help us survive our own thoughts, is just decoration for despair. I'm not talking about carelessness. I mean that subtle art of moving through life knowing it will all vanish and loving it anyway, of placing your hand on the present moment as if on fragile glass, of realizing that nothing lasts, and that's exactly why it's precious. I used to believe wisdom meant detachment. Now I think it's the opposite, to love things fiercely because they disappear. Here, in Sleepless Society, this is where the lucid insomniacs gather, the ones who have thought too much to sleep, but not enough to give up. Each night, a thinker returns from the past to whisper about love, solitude, beauty, and peace. not to teach you, but to keep you company. Because even philosophers were afraid of silence and needed a friend in the dark. So settle in, turn off the lights, listen to the river that still moves somewhere inside you. I'll take you back to where it all began, to Prague, in a time when even the wind smelled of propaganda. That's where I learned that destiny too can lie, that freedom is heavier than it looks, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to be gentle in a world that forgot how. I was born under the shadow of history, the kind that doesn't whisper but shouts through loudspeakers. My childhood was a parade of slogans and statues, each one heavier than the last. In Czechoslovakia, even laughter had a party line. If you laughed at the wrong joke, you disappeared from the photo. I like to say I was a good communist for almost 15 minutes, until I read too much. Books, you see, were my first act of rebellion. They taught me a dangerous habit, to imagine. In a world where imagination was subversive, curiosity felt like a crime. I wrote poems about love and irony, and the censors read them like confessions. Eventually, the regime decided I was no longer useful as a believer. They preferred me as an absence. When they expelled me, I felt strangely light. It's one thing to lose your country. It's another to realize it never truly belonged to you. As I once wrote, the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. I carried my language like a fragile relic. When you lose your homeland, even your memories feel like contraband. Every photograph becomes a smuggled object, every sentence an exile. Paris gave me freedom, but also an unexpected kind of silence. Freedom is lighter than oppression, but also colder. In Prague, I was censored. In Paris, I was ignored. Both hurt the same way, but in different dialects. I remember walking along the Seine, watching my reflection tremble in the water. I thought, perhaps exile isn't about losing a place, but losing the weight that once held you in place. The irony is that every ideology claims to save you from emptiness. Communism promised meaning. Capitalism promises choice. Both turn life into a catalog, one of obedience, the other of options. But I've learned that too many choices can be as suffocating as none. The weight of destiny, I discovered, is often an invention built by those who are terrified of freedom. Today, your dictators wear friendly interfaces. You no longer fear the state. You fear irrelevance. You post your life so it won't vanish. Digital memory against digital oblivion. You curate your identity like propaganda, with filters instead of flags. The tyranny has changed shape, but the anxiety remains. To be seen, to be remembered, to matter. As I once said, man cannot do without meaning, but he cannot bear too much of it either. I carry that contradiction like luggage through every border. Too much weight crushes you, too little, and you drift. And yet, we keep looking for something or someone to anchor us. I used to believe destiny was written by the powerful. Now I think we write it ourselves. Every time we refuse to become what the world expects. The moment you stop obeying the narrative, you begin to exist. The moment you stop pretending to have a purpose, you start breathing again. And just when I thought destiny was my heaviest burden, I met something even more complicated: love. As I once wrote, love begins at the point when a woman enters our life and brings with her a suitcase full of dreams. I remember that suitcase vividly. the sound it made when it opened, the smell of hope and perfume, the soft chaos of another person's soul spilling into yours. My problem was that I kept unpacking other people's suitcases, even when I had nowhere left to put their dreams. Teresa was my double, the part of me that still believed in purity, in the possibility of a love untouched by irony. She wanted to love completely, without remainder, as if love could erase the world's dirt. I admired that innocence and feared it, because innocence, once it collides with reality, tends to bleed. She wanted gravity, I wanted lightness. We both called it love, and both were wrong. She longed for fusion, I longed for air. She wanted to be one body, one fate, one destiny. I wanted to remain a question. And yet, when she left, I felt the strangest silence, the kind that only exists when something essential stops vibrating inside you. As I once said, love is our rebellion against a nothingness. It's the proof we demand from life that we are not alone in the void. But that rebellion can turn into a prison. Love, too, can become a dictatorship, gentle, tender, but absolute. The need to be loved entirely is the heaviest burden of all. When I wrote The Unbearable Lightness of Being, I didn't mean that lightness was better than weight. I meant that the two dance eternally, desire pulling one way, fear the other. Love is that tension between the joy of surrender and the terror of disappearing. In modern times, we've reversed the roles. Today you call it freedom, the art of leaving before you're left. You swipe, you block, you heal. Love has become a detox. We no longer fall in love. We schedule it between two obligations. Romance has turned into risk management. Still, I envy those who dare to fall, even once. Because to love is to believe for a moment that another person's existence can rescue yours from meaninglessness. I've always thought that behind every great love story lies a philosophical question. How much of myself am I willing to give up before I disappear? Teresa taught me that attachment is not the enemy of freedom. Illusion is. You can carry someone lightly, with tenderness, without letting them weigh you down. To love someone is not to merge, but to walk side by side, aware that at any moment, one might vanish. So if you ask me what love is, I'd say this. It's the fragile agreement between two solitudes who promise not to crush each other. It's not to possess, but to witness. To look at another being and think, how extraordinary that you exist at all. That's when I realized the opposite of heaviness isn't happiness. It's forgetting. But forgetting isn't freedom either. It's emptiness disguised as peace. And that question, how to live when nothing repeats, when every moment vanishes, would lead me to Nietzsche, to the eternal return, and to the strange, unbearable lightness of being. If every life occurs only once without rehearsal, then every act is as light as a feather, and that lightness is unbearable. I wrote those words not as a philosopher, but as a man trying to make sense of his own mistakes. Because if nothing returns, nothing truly matters. And yet, if everything returns, life becomes too heavy to bear. I was trapped between two infinities, the gravity of eternity and the weightlessness of chance. Nietzsche dreamed of a universe that repeats itself forever. I prefer to believe that history is allergic to déjà vu. Eternity bored me. Absurdity, at least, had style. The idea of living the same day forever sounded like torture, but the thought of living it only once felt like mockery. Between the two, we oscillate like badly tuned instruments, too heavy to dance, too light to rest. That, to me, is the secret rhythm of human existence. We swing endlessly between meaning and emptiness, between wanting to hold on and wanting to disappear. We crave the permanence of love, but the freedom of indifference. We want to matter, but not too much. We want to be remembered, but not responsible. And so, the pendulum keeps moving, from weight to lightness, from purpose to play. But you, my friend, live in a world addicted to lightness, flexible jobs, temporary loves, rented identities. Everything is free, but nothing is yours. You no longer carry books. You stream them. You no longer write letters. You type disposable words into the void. Even sadness now comes with a skip button. You've built a paradise of options, but no roots. A world of movement, but no direction. When I look at your world, I see my old irony reborn in new clothes. The same fear of weight, but wrapped in convenience. You call it flexibility, minimalism, detachment, elegant names for the inability to stay. You live everywhere and belong nowhere. You connect constantly, but rarely touch. Lightness, once a metaphor, has become your operating system. And I can't blame you. I wanted to be light too. But even my irony weighed a ton. Every time I tried to float, memory pulled me back. Nostalgia is gravity disguised as tenderness. You cannot escape what shaped you. Try as you might to live without weight, you'll soon realize. Without form, there is no beauty. Without memory, there is no self. As I once wrote, the heaviest of burdens is therefore simultaneously an image of life's most intense fulfillment. Too much gravity kills you. Too little makes you disappear. Perhaps wisdom lies not in choosing between the two, but in learning to sway gracefully, knowingly, between both. And when society discovered that lightness sells better than truth, it built the perfect paradise, one where everyone floats and no one stands. In my time, the party told us what to think. Now, the algorithm does it, but with better design. Back then, propaganda came through loudspeakers. Now it comes with notifications and an upbeat soundtrack. The slogans have changed. Work harder, be yourself, upgrade now. But the melody is the same. Don't stop scrolling, don't start thinking. You call it mindfulness. I called it selective amnesia. Same technique, nicer fonts. Back then, we tried to forget the regime. Now you try to forget yourselves. You meditate, you detox, you disconnect, and yet the anxiety stays. Because you can't find peace in a world that sells it by subscription. Everything must be light now. Clothes, relationships, opinions, even grief. We no longer mourn, we move on. We replace people like we replace phones. Faster, thinner, lighter. Even sadness has become ergonomic. The tragedy of the modern world is not that we suffer too much, but that we no longer know how to suffer meaningfully. As I once wrote, the stupidity of people comes from having an answer for everything. The wisdom of the novel comes from having a question for everything. And today, questions are disappearing. The algorithm hates uncertainty. It prefers certainty that can be monetized. We are living in a dictatorship of conclusions, surrounded by people terrified of nuance. I used to think novels would save the world. Now I'm grateful if people read past the caption. The modern reader wants enlightenment in 20 seconds, catharsis in a clip, redemption with background music. Philosophy has been replaced by quotes, my own sentences, stolen from context, printed on coffee mugs and yoga mats. It's poetic justice, really. A writer who mocked seriousness reduced to home decor. And yet, I can't even be angry. I understand the fatigue. When everything is loud, lightness becomes a kind of survival. You scroll to forget. You laugh to avoid thinking. You live in fragments because wholeness feels impossible. But beware. The lightness you're sold is not freedom. It's anesthesia. The absence of pain isn't peace. It's numbness with good lighting. The modern world has turned lightness into a product. We buy what used to be free: silence, space, attention. We collect experiences like postcards, never staying long enough to belong anywhere. And still, beneath all that motion, a quiet longing remains. The desire to feel heavy again, to be rooted, to mean something. As I once said, the only truly serious question is whether to make love or to write. It was a joke, of course, but also the truest thing I ever wrote, because both acts, at their best, are an attempt to recover weight in a world obsessed with surface. So perhaps the challenge today is not to reject lightness, but to rediscover it. The inner lightness that comes from grace, not consumption. The kind that allows you to move gently through life without losing your shape. But there is another kind of lightness, one that has nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with grace. True lightness is not indifference. It is the art of touching life without crushing it. I used to think freedom meant distance, the ability to detach from everything and everyone. But distance, I learned, is not peace. It's loneliness with better lighting. Real peace is to be close to the world without being swallowed by it, to feel everything deeply and still remain soft. When I was young, I wanted to be invincible. I believed that to be strong meant to resist, to endure, to never bend. Now I just want to be porous. I want the world to pass through me. The sunlight on a park bench, the smell of coffee at dawn, the laughter of strangers that briefly reminds me life goes on. The warmth of a hand that doesn't need to promise forever. As I once wrote, there is nothing heavier than compassion. Not even one's own pain weighs so much as the pain one feels with someone. Compassion is the heaviest burden, and yet it's the only weight worth carrying. Because to be human is to share the ache of existence, not to escape it. Lightness, then, is not a lack of care. It's caring without possession, to love without control, to give without calculating the return, to exist without constant self-measurement. That's the true rebellion today. The modern world keeps shouting, optimize, become stronger, faster, more productive, more efficient, as if the goal of life were to become a perfectly functioning machine. But the soul is not a device. It doesn't run on upgrades. What it needs is slowness, silence, imperfection. It needs to fail sometimes, to lose its balance, to remember that meaning isn't downloaded. It's cultivated gently through attention. So try this. Walk without purpose, not toward anything, but with something. With the wind, the rhythm of your breath, the hum of life that doesn't need an audience. Write a sentence that will never be published, a confession to no one but yourself. Love someone without trying to fix them. Forgive yourself for not being a masterpiece. There's a quiet joy in being unfinished. When I was younger, I chased perfection like a ghost. I wanted to be admired, understood, remembered. I wrote, not always to express, but to survive the fear of being ordinary. But the truth is, ordinariness is not a curse. It's the hidden harmony of existence. The way a blade of grass bends under the rain, or how the same sun warms both kings and beggars. Lightness begins when you stop fighting to be extraordinary and start noticing that everything around you already is. To live lightly, you must first forgive life for not being what you expected. You must forgive time for its cruelty and forgive yourself for its scars. You will never find peace in control, only in consent. When you stop demanding that life be fair, you finally start to see that it is generous in ways you never asked for. Try this. When you wake up tomorrow, instead of opening your phone, open the window. Let the world in before the noise. Look at the sky and remember that it has survived everything: wars, revolutions, heartbreaks, and still manages to blush every morning. Take one deep breath, not to calm down, but to remember that your body already knows how to heal. When you start living lightly, the world stops being an obstacle and becomes an invitation. The same streets, the same mornings, the same mistakes, but seen through tenderness instead of tension. You begin to notice how every breath is a miracle of balance. The body lets go and the air returns. The universe is teaching you this every second. Release, receive, release again. Of course, the weight will return. It always does. Some days you'll feel as though the world is pressing down on your chest. Responsibilities, losses, anxieties, they never disappear. They just change their costume. Don't fight them. Sit with them. Ask what they came to teach. Because heaviness isn't the enemy. It's the teacher that reminds you what matters. When life feels unbearable, pause. You're not broken. You're simply full of thoughts, of fears, of too many unspoken feelings. Step outside yourself for a moment. Feel the wind on your skin. Listen to something ancient. The sea, the night, your own heartbeat. These are reminders that you belong to something vast, something patient, something that has carried humanity long before you worried about being late. I used to fear that if I didn't hold tightly to people, ideas, or identity, I would vanish. Now I know that what is real never needs to be gripped. It remains, even in absence. Love that is genuine does not demand your chains. It survives your freedom. Friendships that are true don't need constant proof. And meaning, if it exists at all, is not hidden in great declarations, but in the simple miracle of staying curious despite everything. So here's what I've learned. After 50 years and 3 exiles, letting go is not a defeat. It's the only honest way to dance with time. Life moves whether you do or not. You can drag your feet or let the rhythm guide you. The music is already playing, quiet, imperfect, eternal. When the weight returns, and it will, remember this: you can't erase heaviness, only learn its rhythm. Every life, no matter how painful, contains a hidden music. You are not meant to silence it, but to move with it, sometimes slowly, sometimes wild, sometimes barely at all. And when you finally learn that step, you realize even pain has rhythm, and that rhythm, when you stop resisting it, is called life. Night again. Prague sleeps beneath a silver mist, and the Vltava glides quietly through the city. slow, timeless, unbothered by memory. The streetlights tremble on its surface like thoughts that refuse to sink. I used to walk here in my youth, searching for meaning in every shadow, desperate to belong to something larger than myself. Once, I thought meaning came from weight. Now I know it comes from movement. I've carried so many burdens through the years. The burden of ideology, the burden of love, the burden of wanting to matter. Each one promised significance, and each one demanded a part of my freedom. But as I grew older, I began to see that heaviness is seductive. It makes us feel real, even when it crushes us. What I had mistaken for responsibility was often fear. Fear of emptiness, fear of insignificance, fear of living without a script. That's what the unbearable lightness of being was always about. Not a love story, not a philosophy, but a confession. A confession that life without repetition, without certainty, without destiny, can still be luminous. That the absence of meaning doesn't have to be despair. It can be grace. Between the heaviness of duty and the emptiness of freedom, there is a thin air where life breathes easily. That is where I live now. Not grasping, not drifting, just floating in the quiet certainty that everything passes. And that's what makes it beautiful. When I was young, I thought I needed to change the world. Later, I only wanted to understand it. Now, I just want to marvel at it, to laugh softly at its absurdity, to love it gently despite its cruelty. Maybe wisdom is simply this: to walk through chaos without hardening, to feel deeply without drowning. As I once wrote, when the heart speaks, the mind must remain silent. Philosophy tries to explain life. Art only reminds us to live it. The river knows this. It carries everything: memories, regrets, the ashes of revolutions, and still finds its way to the sea. It doesn't cling to what it has carried. It just moves on, lighter with every mile. So if you've walked with me this far, through the heaviness of destiny, the confusion of love, the vertigo of freedom, I hope you felt what I have, that lightness is not escape, but courage. The courage to let go without becoming empty, to care without control, to exist without applause. Maybe happiness is nothing more than this: the courage to touch the world softly and still leave a trace, to live without trying to possess the moment, yet to honor it as it flows through your hands, to know that love, art, laughter, even sorrow, all of it is borrowed, and that's precisely what makes it precious. I look at the water and see a single feather drifting downstream, weightless, luminous, free. It doesn't fight the current. It doesn't try to go faster. It simply moves, graceful because it doesn't resist. You will vanish too. But for one instant, you were here, light and real. So tell me before you go, what burden are you finally ready to set down so that you can be light again? And if these words helped you breathe a little easier tonight, share them with someone who still carries too much. Because sometimes, the smallest act of grace, a shared story, a moment of stillness, can be the weight that finally sets another soul free. And if tomorrow feels unbearably heavy again, don't worry. It just means you're still being.